She was a woman who loved deeply. A wife who believed in the vows she had spoken. A home filled with warmth, laughter, and the kind of trust that should never be broken. She lived for the quiet moments, the ones where her husband reached for her hand at the dinner table, where they planned their future, where love was supposed to be enough. Then one evening she was gone. No calls. No messages. No goodbyes. Her car sat untouched in the driveway. Her phone silent. Days passed, and the search for her turned desperate. Family, friends, even strangers combed through every possibility. Had she walked away? Had something terrible happened? Her husband stood in front of the cameras, his voice thick with emotion, pleading for her return. But as investigators pieced together her final hours, the story he told started to slip through the cracks. Then, a breakthrough. A discovery that shattered everything. Hidden away, out of sight, was the truth. And it was far worse than anyone could have imagined. A wife missing. A husband with secrets. And an affair that ended in death. This is the true story of betrayal, deception, and the moment love turned lethal. It was the evening of July 14, 2023, in the quiet suburbs of Charleston, South Carolina, a place where tree-lined streets stretched for miles, where neighbors waved to each other from their front porches, where families gathered on warm summer nights. It was the kind of town where people felt safe, where doors were left unlocked without a second thought. The Harrington home sat on the edge of a well-manicured cul-de-sac, a sprawling two-story house with white columns and a wraparound porch. It was the picture of a perfect Southern home, a place that exuded stability, success, and love. Inside that house lived Clare Harrington, 38 years old, a woman known for her kindness, her unwavering loyalty, and her deep devotion to her husband. To those who knew her, she was a woman who radiated warmth. She was a pediatric nurse, a caregiver by nature, someone who spent her days tending to sick children and then returned home to a life she believed was built on trust. She had been married for 12 years to Michael Harrington, 42, a successful real estate developer whose name was well known in Charleston's business circles. He was charming, well-spoken, and the kind of man people gravitated toward. In public, he was the loving husband, the doting partner who showered Clare with compliments and gifts. Friends described their marriage as solid, but only from the outside. What most people didn't know was that behind the grand front doors of their perfect home, cracks had been forming for years. And at the center of it all was Regina Ramirez, 29, the woman who had been hired to care for their estate. She was a housekeeper from Mexico, known for her working step, her beautiful body, and the quiet way she moved through the property. She had been working for the Harringtons for nearly 2 years. And during that time, something had changed. Neighbors had seen it before they even understood what they were looking at. The way Michael lingered near Regina as she worked, the hushed conversations, the shared glances. It wasn't until later that they realized they had been witnessing something far more intimate than just an employer-employee relationship. It wasn't Claire who had been unfaithful. It was Michael. And what started as a secret rendezvous would soon unravel into something no one saw coming. On the morning of July 14th, Claire woke up early, just as she always did. Security cameras showed her walking out to get the newspaper, her hair tied up in a loose bun, still in her robe. Nothing about that morning seemed unusual. By 9 a.m., she had left for work, stopping at her favorite cafe for coffee, her last recorded transaction. She finished her shift at 7 p.m. and texted Michael. "Heading home. Do you want me to pick up dinner?" He never responded. At 7:42 p.m., Claire's car pulled into the driveway. Security cameras caught her stepping out, locking the door behind her. She walked inside. And that was the last time anyone saw her alive. Her sudden disappearance sent shockwaves through the neighborhood. Claire wasn't the type to just leave. She had no history of mental illness, no signs of distress in the days leading up to that night. Yet by the following morning, she was gone. Her purse was found sitting on the kitchen counter. Her car keys were still in the bowl by the door. Her phone had been left charging on her nightstand. There was no sign of forced entry. No struggle. No blood. Michael told police he had been out meeting a client when Clare returned home. He claimed he had arrived at 9:30 p.m., assuming she had already gone to bed. By morning, when he woke up, her side of the bed was empty. At first, he didn't panic. He said he thought she had gone out for a run or stepped out for coffee. But as the hours ticked by, Clare's mother grew worried. Calls and messages went unanswered. At 3:17 p.m., her mother called 911. "My daughter is missing," she told the dispatcher. "This isn't like her. Something is wrong." But when investigators arrived, Michael was strangely calm. He insisted Clare had left on her own, that she had been acting distant lately. Then, something changed. As police questioned him, his answers became inconsistent. And within 72 hours, detectives would uncover a truth that would shake this quiet community to its core. Clare Harrington had been murdered. And the people closest to her knew more than they were telling. What really happened inside that house? And how did a woman who gave everything to her marriage become the victim of a deadly betrayal? The search for Clare was just beginning. Suspicion grows. The 911 call came in at 3:17 p.m. on July 15, 2023, a full 18 hours since Clare Harrington was last seen. The voice on the other end wasn't her husband's. It was her mother, Diane Reynolds. "My daughter is missing," she told the dispatcher, her voice shaking. "Her car is here. Her phone is here. This isn't like her. Something is wrong." Officers arrived at the Harrington home within 20 minutes. Michael met them at the door, appearing strangely composed. He repeated what he had already told Clare's family, that he assumed she had gone out early and simply hadn't returned. "Maybe she needed space," he suggested. But Clare's mother wasn't convinced. "She wouldn't just leave without telling me. And she would never leave her phone behind." Inside the house, everything was in place. The living room was neat. The kitchen spotless. There were no signs of forced entry, no signs of a struggle, nothing that suggested Clare had left in a hurry or been taken against her will. Yet one detail stood out immediately. Her handbag was sitting on the kitchen counter untouched. Her car keys were in their usual spot. Her phone, still plugged in on the nightstand, showed her last text. "Heading home. Do you want me to pick up dinner?" There was no response from Michael. To detectives, this detail raised a critical question. If Clare had planned to leave, why would she have left everything behind? And why hadn't Michael reported her missing himself? The first major clue came from a neighbor, Rebecca Lawson, who lived across the street. Rebecca told detectives that around 10:30 p.m. the night before, she had seen Michael's car pull out of the driveway. She didn't think much of it at the time. But when detectives checked the home's security footage, it confirmed her statement. At 10:45 p.m., Michael left the house. And he wasn't alone. In the passenger seat, barely visible in the dim light, was Regina Ramirez, the housekeeper. They returned nearly 2 hours later, pulling back into the driveway at 12:37 a.m. By the time morning arrived, Clare was gone. Investigators pressed Michael for an explanation. Where had he gone that night? "I went for a drive," he said. "I needed some air. I asked Regina to come with me?" Who asked a housekeeper to a walk? But when asked what they talked about, Michael's answers became vague. He couldn't recall details, where they had gone, what roads they took, what they talked about. Then came another red flag. When police asked to speak with Regina, she was nowhere to be found. Michael claimed he had no idea where she was. But Regina's phone had been disconnected. And by the time officers checked her apartment, she was gone. As detectives pushed deeper, Michael's web of lies started to unravel. They pulled phone records. And what they found changed everything. For nearly 6 months, Michael had been exchanging hundreds of texts with Regina, some late at night, others in the early hours of the morning. Many were deleted. But one wasn't. A message from Regina, sent 2 weeks before Clare vanished. "We can't keep doing this. She's going to find out." It confirmed what detectives already suspected. This wasn't just a professional relationship. It was an affair. And it wasn't just speculation. There was proof. They dug into Michael's financial records. There, they found hotel charges, restaurant bills, and plane tickets, all booked under his company's name, all matching times when Diego had taken personal days from work. The biggest piece of evidence? A hidden bank account, one that Claire never knew existed. Every month, thousands of dollars had been deposited into Diego's personal account. But detectives had one question they couldn't yet answer. Had Claire known? Had she discovered the affair? Had she confronted Michael? And if she had that confrontation led to her death? With each passing hour, the case was shifting. This was no longer a simple missing persons case. This was something far worse. Claire wasn't missing. Claire was gone. And the two people who knew what happened to her were hiding something. For nearly a week, investigators combed through every lead, every piece of surveillance footage, every phone record, but Clare Harrington was still missing. Then, a breakthrough came. Detectives obtained a search warrant for the Harrington home. They searched every inch, closets, crawl spaces, drains, but found nothing suspicious. Until they stepped outside. Behind the house, near the garden, a small section of the yard caught their attention. The soil looked disturbed, looser than the rest. A faint odor hung in the air, one that seasoned investigators recognized instantly. A team of forensic specialists arrived. The moment they drove a probe into the ground, the truth began to surface. Barely 2 feet beneath the soil, they found her hand, pale, lifeless, fingers still adorned with her wedding ring. The garden, the same one she had tended to for years, had become her final resting place. The medical examiner was called in immediately. When Claire's body was exhumed, the full horror of her death became clear. She had been strangled. Bruises on her neck showed deep handprints, the telltale signs of a violent struggle. Her fingernails were broken, suggesting she had fought back, clawing at her attacker in her final moments. She had been buried in her nightgown. She never even made it out of the house alive. Claire hadn't vanished in the early hours of the morning. She had been murdered before midnight. And now, investigators had 2 prime suspects, Michael Harrington and Diego Ramirez. At first, Michael held firm to his alibi. "I was out that night. I went for a drive with Regina. I had nothing to do with this." But the forensic evidence told a different story. Inside the house, luminol testing revealed traces of blood in the master bedroom, small droplets near the headboard, a faint streak near the doorway. Someone had tried to clean up. The bed linens? Freshly washed. Yet, under UV light, investigators found invisible stains. The unmistakable presence of blood, sweat, and struggle. Michael's phone records painted an even more damning picture. At 10:12 p.m., just minutes before Rebecca Lawson saw Michael leave the house, his phone connected to the home's Wi-Fi, meaning he was still inside. At 10:25 p.m., he texted Regina, "Come now. It's done." At 10:45 p.m., the security footage caught them both leaving together, right around the time neighbors recalled hearing a muffled scream. When Regina was finally tracked down hiding at a relative's house in Texas, investigators wasted no time bringing her in for questioning. And within 3 hours she cracked. At first, Regina refused to talk. "I had nothing to do with it," she insisted. "Michael just asked me to help him with something. I didn't know what." But detectives had evidence. They showed her photos of Claire's body. Autopsy results. The text messages. The security footage. Regina's face paled. She started shaking her head, breathing heavily. Then, she broke down in tears. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she whispered. Slowly, the truth unraveled. According to Regina, Michael had been planning to leave Claire for months. But there was one problem: money. Michael was deeply in debt. His business was failing, and if he divorced Claire, he would lose half of everything. Claire had suspected something: his late nights, his unexplained absences. On the night of July 14th, she finally confronted him. She had found the messages. The hotel bills. The money transfers. You disgust me, she had told him. I want a divorce. Michael panicked. A divorce would mean ruin. He would lose his home, his reputation, his career. And so, he made a decision. He wrapped his hands around Claire's throat. At first, she struggled. She fought back. But Michael was stronger. Within minutes, Claire's body fell limp. She was gone. It was Regina who helped him bury her. I didn't kill her, Regina insisted. I didn't even know he was going to do it. He called me after. He begged me to help him. But investigators didn't believe Diego was just an innocent bystander. She had helped move the body. She had helped cover up the crime. And now, both were facing murder charges. The case was nearly solved. But there was one final twist. One final piece of evidence. And it was about to seal their fate forever. With Regina Ramirez's confession on record and Michael Harrington's lies unraveling, authorities moved quickly. At 6:45 a.m. on July 22nd, a team of officers arrived at Michael's estate. They found him in the kitchen, sipping coffee, as if his wife hadn't been murdered and buried in the backyard just days prior. When they placed him in handcuffs, he barely reacted. You're making a mistake, he muttered. But the moment they told him Regina had confessed, his demeanor shifted. His face tightened. His breathing sped up. What did she say? Michael wasn't concerned about Claire. He was worried about himself. Meanwhile, Regina was arrested just hours later, at her cousin's house in Texas. Unlike Michael, Regina was shaking, eyes red from crying. She kept repeating, I didn't kill her. I didn't kill her. But under state law, she was just as guilty. Both were charged with first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and conspiracy. Now, it was up to a jury to decide their fate. The trial of Michael Harrington and Regina Ramirez began in April 2024 and quickly became a media sensation. The prosecution wasted no time painting Michael as a cold, calculating man who murdered his wife to escape financial ruin. This was not a moment of passion. The district attorney told the jury. This was a premeditated killing. A husband who saw his wife as an obstacle. A man who saw murder as his only way out. They laid out their case with painstaking detail. The financial motive: Michael was drowning in debt, and Claire's life insurance policy was worth $500,000. The affair, hotel receipts, text messages, and secret emails between Michael and Regina proved the relationship was more than casual. The timeline, phone records, forensic evidence, and Regina's confession showed that Claire was dead before Michael ever left the house that night. To strengthen their case, prosecutors brought in expert witnesses. A forensic analyst testified that the bruising patterns on Claire's neck suggested prolonged strangulation, meaning Michael didn't just kill her, he watched her die slowly. A forensic pathologist confirmed that Claire had been alive in the house when Michael claimed he was out. A digital forensics expert presented deleted messages between Michael and Regina. One in particular stood out. We'll be free soon. Then came the most chilling moment of the trial, when Claire's sister, Rachel, took the stand. She locked eyes with Michael before speaking. My sister trusted you, she said, her voice shaking. She gave you everything. And you threw her away like she was nothing. Michael didn't flinch. But Regina lowered her head, tears running down her face. Michael's attorneys fought back hard. They tried to shift the blame onto Regina, claiming that Michael only helped dispose of Claire's body out of fear. My client was manipulated, his lawyer argued. He had no choice. They even suggested that Regina might have acted alone, stating, there is no direct evidence linking Michael to the actual murder. Only Regina's word. But there was one problem. Michael hadn't just helped bury Claire. His DNA was found under her fingernails. The marks on her neck matched his hand size. And Regina? Her lawyer admitted that she helped cover up the crime but insisted that she never laid a hand on Claire. My client made a terrible mistake, the defense conceded. But she is not a killer. It was one man's word against another. But the jury wasn't convinced. After just 7 hours of deliberation, the jury returned their verdicts. Michael Harrington, guilty of first-degree murder. Regina Ramirez, guilty of second-degree murder and tampering with evidence. Michael showed no emotion as the words were read. But Regina? She collapsed into her chair, sobbing. On June 10, 2024, the judge handed down the sentences. Michael Harrington, life in prison without parole. Regina Ramirez, 25 years with the possibility of parole after 18. For Clare's family, it was justice, but not closure. Outside the courthouse, her sister Rachel spoke to reporters. "No sentence will bring Clare back," she said. "But at least now she can rest." Michael never apologized. Never showed remorse. The man who once vowed to love Clare forever would now spend the rest of his life behind bars. As for Regina, she would one day walk free. But her freedom would come at a price. She would forever be known as the woman who helped bury a murdered woman. Even after the trial, questions remained. Did Regina play a bigger role than she admitted? While she maintained that she only helped cover up the crime, some investigators weren't convinced. Could she have been involved in the actual murder? Was Clare's death truly premeditated? While the prosecution argued that Michael had planned this for months, others believed he snapped in the moment, when Clare demanded a divorce. What would have happened if Clare never confronted him that night? Would he have found another way to get rid of her? Clare never saw it coming. She trusted the man she married. She believed that love meant safety. Instead, the person who should have protected her the most was the one who ended her life. And in the end, the truth wasn't just buried in the garden. It was buried in betrayal, greed, and a love that was never real. Let us know in the comments, do you think Diego's sentence was fair? And do you believe Michael planned this from the start? If you found this case shocking, don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories, where every crime has a final truth.